Hello and welcome to TheSixthAxis.com. I'm Jim and I'm joined by Stefan. Hello Stefan.
Hello, how's it going?
Who's been reviewing Trials Rising, the first game in quite a long time out of RedLynx. So how have you been getting along with the game?
Yeah, I've been getting on quite well. It's Trials, basically. If you know what Trials is, you will feel right at home in this game.
So, in a nutshell, what is Trials for someone who hasn't ever touched the series before?
So it's this weird kind. You can call it a couple of different things. You can call it a racing game. You can call it a platforming game. It's kind of all of these things combined. You are a rider on a motorbike, on a dirt bike really, and you've got a trial in front of you. You've got this series of platforms, environmental things going on, and you've got to get from the start to the end without crashing too many times, and all of this stuff. It's quite a lot of effort to get to the end if you're not particularly familiar with a particular level, because there's always something new around the corner that's always going to trip you up and cause you to face plant into a stray bit of wood or into massive wrecking ball or something like that. There's always something ridiculous that RedLynx like to put into these games, and so it's this mixture of platforming, difficulty, and like the satisfaction of actually getting through to the other end, and that's what's made it such a compelling series for such a long time.
The core part of what really sort of draws people to the series and what sort of winds people up about Trials is that sort of score chasing, time beating element where you are just hammering away trying to shave off the seconds of other players' times, and Trials has this really neat little thing where you can just press a button to restart the entire track or restart from a checkpoint.
Yeah, so there's two ways that you can reset. You can reset to the most recent checkpoint, which is usually within the last, 15, 20 meters. They're pretty regular through the level, unless you come to a community-created one made by a complete and utter sadist. Or you can press the button, and that sets you all the way straight to the back. But they've built their engine around the fact that you press that button, and it's practically instant that you get back to the very start. Personally, I'm always going back to the very start because it just nags me to hell if I've got even just 2 or 3 resets within the level, and it just drags away from my time, and I know I can do better. It's just one of those things.
There's definitely that one more go factor that they do, like RedLynx know, they put it in the loading screen tips. It's definitely got one more go factor where even if you know that the ghost riding in front of you is going to beat you by half a second, or you land a jump that's just not, it just doesn't feel right in some way, you're going to be reaching for that button and you're going to be going again.
I think the one thing is that even if you manage to do the exact same thing, or it feels like you're doing the exact same thing, you can get ever so slightly different results each time. There's always just a slight bit of bounce in the springs of the suspension of your bike, or there's, you manage to catch a particular ledge in a slightly different way, and it just throws you off ever so slightly. So part of the compelling replay value of the game is that you always know that you can find a little bit of extra time if everything just about goes in your way.
Yeah.
But it's so difficult to get that entire run together.
Oh, it is. Pulling that off in one go, like you say, it's tough to do, but when you do it and you see yourself, even if you're only half a second ahead or shaving half a second off the time of the previous person who's on your friends list, for instance, it's a massive sense of reward you get from it. Which is, it's kind of weird because the actual core gameplay, when you've got Trials in your hands, it's not a complex game to play. You've got your throttle and your sort of weight distribution.
Yeah,
it's the only two things.
Literally those two things, but you can do an awful lot with it. The early levels that you face in the game and across the series, the early levels in each game, they're always pretty straightforward. It's sort of just land, make sure that you're steady, you've got power in the back wheel, so you need to make sure that's planted down on the ground. But then from that, you can do wheelies, you can do, I forget all the names, but where you're bouncing on the front wheel, where you're bouncing, everything like that. And some of the later levels do start to play on that, or there's secret levels somewhere, and they're playing around with these ideas, and they just get so difficult. And there's always been that kind of ability threshold in the game.
And in terms of the actual levels themselves, I haven't played any of the previous Trials games. I think my first experience with Trials was back when it did actually used to be a Flash game.
Oh yeah, it started then.
Or a Java game, and you had so many games that spun out of that sort of trend. But so for me, coming to Trials Rising and just seeing how inventive the level designs are, and it's not just from how they're designed from like a mechanical or systems perspective. It's all like the level dressing, like RedLynx really go out of their way to sort of add some sort of flavour or character to each of these levels.
Yeah, so the last proper game was Trials Fusion. That was when it came to PlayStation for the first time, PS4. I think it did actually come out on 360, that game as well, and Xbox One and stuff.
2014.
Yeah, back then. So start of the generation. It's been 5 long years, and we're going to pretend like Trials of the Blood Dragon didn't happen because that game was not good. So let's move on from there. What I will say is that, like Fusion, they tried to do something a bit new and different. They had kind of a futuristic, post-apocalyptic, weird robot lady talking to you and stuff like that. And for Rising, they've kind of gone back to something a bit more grounded. So, like, there's levels. So basically, they spread the levels around the world conceptually. And so you've got a level in Hollywood where you've got some of the set dressing of like a Hollywood action film, and there's a very cool cut halfway through into a science fiction film as well.
Yeah,
then
there's a brilliant variety to the levels. Just like you say, it's sort of, they've had fun doing it. I think one of the ones I was playing earlier was El Tomate, which
I played that one. Yeah, where you just land and stuff and it explodes tomatoes.
Yeah, so it's like a tomato festival in a little Spanish village.
Yeah, they also play around with the mechanics a little bit as well. There's so there is the set of skill games, they call them, and so within this there's something ridiculous like you've got to ride your bike off a ledge, eject your rider, catch a basketball, and if you get the trajectory just right, you can carry the basketball through to a basketball hoop, and then you score. And then you have to try and do this like as many times as you can within 3 or 4 goes or something like that, and then you get medals based off that. Or it's kind of like a ski jump, but you eject and then you've got to try and bounce off barrels, which brings a little bit of Burnout's destruction mode, and it's got a little bit hints of that in there as well. And so there's different styles of gameplay, and even within the trials, there's another one. One particular level has you get a rocket boost if you jump through a hoop. And so then you've suddenly got a huge amount of thrust, you're in midair, and you're like, oh my god, how do I control this? And trying to just manage to get yourself to the next platform before you run out of rocket boost, or somewhere safe that you can land.
Yeah, there's definitely plenty to do, and going back to something you said earlier about medals are, they're one measure of tracking your progress through trials, because you've got this huge world map that just keeps filling up with events all over the shop, and even if you beat one race, chances are you're going to be going back to that race because you get like new contracts. You get, like I was explaining to you earlier, when I logged on earlier today, I tried to go back to a level and it said player X has beaten your time, so it sort of like goads you into going back and taking revenge on the player who beat your time.
Yeah, definitely. Replaying levels is obviously part of it, but they're quite clever in how they go about it. So you do have these contracts, you have additional things to do within the level outside of just getting to the end in the quickest time, and sometimes it's basically just don't reset or try and beat a particular racer, because you've got actual racer ghosts now instead of just the position markers. And so that would be a kind of a stock built-in time. But then you've also got ghosts from other players, and so you can try, which have been dragged down from the internet, and so you can try and beat those times instead. And it's a weird one where you can come like third in the race, but still get the gold medal.
Yeah, and also, like you said, like there's extra layers of challenges. Like going back, easy levels are pretty easy to breeze through, but if you try and go back, and it will tell you to like try and do 6 backflips without having a wipeout or something like that. So there's definitely a lot of replay value that adds to these levels, as well as you as you go along, you unlock new bikes as well. So going back and trying the different bikes out adds a bit of variation to the gameplay, I would say.
Yeah, because you've got more powerful bikes, which are obviously a bit trickier to control. They've got like different variabilities to them, basically. I would say though that it's very good at throwing lots of different events at you. You effectively level up 1 point every single time you complete a level, and you win it with a gold medal or something like that. That's what it feels like. It's kind of roughly like that. Every single time you then get a loot box, which kind of adds another bit of fluff to the menu system, and then you get to the world map. And if you complete about 4 or 5 of these, let's say about 10 events, then you can get through to a stadium tour, which is more head-to-head motocross type stuff. So there's some interesting ways that it's all mixed up, but I do feel like it's a little bit messy.
How so?
Well, it's not a particularly clear progression. So you start off in the US, then you go to Europe, then you go to Asia, and then you go into different parts of Asia, and then back to Europe and stuff like that. You're bouncing around, and everything is labelled with a particular difficulty. And you can filter the map, but there's an awful lot of stuff going on there. And if you're a new player, one of the key things is that they've got tutorials built into the game, and these are built in using the University of Trials, which is hosted by a guy called Fat Shady, who I think sort of came up through, I know it's a strange name, but it's sort of like an online pseudonym of a real person.
Oh, wow, okay.
And he's been doing trials, tutorials online on YouTube for quite a long time, and trying to show people how to play the game. They're sort of folding that into the game, and it makes a much better experience, and it explains things a lot better than it did in Trials Fusion.
Yeah.
But the thing is, that's just in one part of the map, and for some reason the tutorials are level gated.
Yeah,
and I'm not sure why that is. It kind of feels like that they want to show you some stuff, but they don't want to show you too much.
To begin with, it shows you the very basics, just throttle control, and I think when you have to go to level 14 to sort of like get the tutorial on air control, which it should.
Yeah, and at that point, like every single level has you flying through the air.
Yeah.
So that's one of the key things that you should be learning right at the start, and like it does start to show you the much more advanced things, but you're like 40 levels into the game. You've been through, well, no, not 40, about 30 levels into the game. You've been through 30 beginner or easy trials at that point, and then it's telling you some slightly more advanced things. I don't know. It's an interesting problem for them, and they've gone about it in a slightly different way. But it's also something that's obviously not needed if you've played previous games and you've got a good handle on what the actual controls are.
So, long term, do you see yourself coming back to Trials again and again, or do you think you're just going to blitz it?
Well, I'm not a particularly good example of this, but it kind of feels like if you're someone that's been looking for a new Trials game for a while, and the Trials games are very, very popular, then this is like a very, very good example, and they've got community stuff built into it as well, so you can create hundreds, thousands, millions of tracks, and you can play other people's tracks and stuff like that.
And going back to the track editor, give it a few weeks and people will be making some pretty gnarly tracks for other racers to play. But I had a quick dip into it, and it does seem like a fairly robust tool set. Like you can change like camera angles, you can take objects from previous Trials games, including Trials of the Blood Dragon, and put those in your stages.
Yeah, I think it's all the way back to, I forget the name of the...
It might be Evolution 2012.
Yes, it goes all the way back to Evolution. You've got Fusion, you've got Blood Dragon, and you've got everything in Rising as well.
Yeah, so I'd say you get a lot of bang for your buck. This is a £20 game, which, again, if you look at Trials just in terms of its core gameplay, it's a very, very simple game. But it comes with all of those Ubisoft bells and whistles, the progression system, having a world map and stuff like that, which I would say does sort of justify the £20 price tag.
Oh yeah, no, it's easily worth 20 quid. So there's a lot of customization in the game, which is great. But the only thing that I think people will be a little bit confused by, or a bit nose put out of joint by, is the loot system, which I'm not entirely sure its necessity and design in the game sits quite right. It's this really, really strange one. You've got loot boxes, and within that you can have stickers, you can have bike parts, you can have clothing items for your character. And it's the third bit, which I believe is the new part of this system.
Right.
It's the new thing that you can unlock and customize. But there's so much duplication in these boxes. You get a box every single time you level up, and I don't think there's enough content there to really back it up.
No.
So you can go in and you can trade in a duplicate item or something you just don't really want anyway.
Yeah.
And you can get a few coins, in-game currency, to get those back. The microtransactions come in with buying specific things, so that's good. It's not the actual loot boxes, it's buying specific costumes, poses, stuff like that. But yeah, I just don't see the point of the loot boxes, and they just add a little bit of extra chrome and nonsense to the menu system, which I come out of a trial And then I've got an award screen, I've got a level up screen, I've got to find the next thing on the map, I've got to blah, blah, blah. There's like 5 or 6 different layers before I can get back to the next trial, or maybe if I'm not happy and I don't think to myself, I should press the restart button, then it's 5 or 6 steps to get back to the same trial that I want to do again.
Yeah,
and I think it's just a little bit much.
It definitely suffers a little bit from just that sort of Ubisoft spreadsheet approach to design, where it has to have a world map, it has to bombard you with like notifications and stuff like that, which is you can look at that 2 ways. For some people it'll sort of like ease them into the whole Trials experience if they haven't played one of these games before, but then, you know, after the stabilizers have come off, like you said, if you complete a stage and you just want to have another go, you have to wait at least, it's only like 20 to 30 seconds to have another go at that track from the start, but it's still...
Yeah, I mean, it's not that bad. It's not as bad as, I don't know, Anthem, but it's just a little bit of an annoyance, basically.
So in terms of multiplayer options, what is Trials Rising bringing to the table this time around?
I mean, you've got a pretty full spread. You've got the online multiplayer where you're racing against other people's ghosts. You've got that in local party play, where you've also got the side-by-side motocross. But there's also a new co-op mode, which is quite a lot of fun, where you've got a tandem bike. And this is actually unlocked right from the off. You can find it just by scrolling all the way to the right when you're picking your bike on the world map. You can do it in almost anything apart from when you've got head-to-head motocross-style races. And that bike is a lot of fun because you've both got control over the throttle, you've both got control over the weight transfer, and if one of you wants to be a bit of an arse to the other, you can eject and leave them with half the power and half the control. So there's a bit of fun and shenanigans that you can get up to there.
Yeah, so like another layer of replay value.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one that's really great for sitting down with someone that's maybe not so familiar with the game and just showing them the ropes and then taking them over because you can.
If you're the sort of person who gets frustrated by Trials Rising like me, then having another person weighing you down just sounds like the perfect nightmare, really.
Oh yeah, but you can turn that nightmare around on them.
Right, brilliant. That's a good place to wrap things up. We've got a written review over at TheSixthAxis.com. The game's out tomorrow on Tuesday, 26th February on PS4, Xbox One, Switch and PC. Make sure to like, subscribe and share if you've had an awesome time watching this video, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.
Bye.